What's going on, guys? We are post-Canadian Grand Prix, and what an exciting day it was all over the grid. We're going to be talking about it, diving in deep here on the Lap Podcast. If this is your first time visiting the channel, first time seeing one of our videos, make sure to follow us, subscribe, check out the social medias on the bottom. But oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I'm so ecstatic. I'm so incredibly excited. What a Canadian Grand Prix from beginning to end. This entire weekend has really been something. Qualifying on Saturday was insane. It was so close, with George Russell putting in a slam dunk P1 and then able to convert it to victory. Oh my gosh. So much going into this race, but I do want to start here. I want to start with the Papaya incident. That's what we're calling it. That's what it will be referred to as, because what we saw between the two McLarens in the final 10 laps of this Grand Prix, as Oscar Piastri was trying to creep closer and closer and closer for another podium finish, on this season where they hadn't missed the podium, at least to my recollection, at all. Oscar Piastri driving smartly, creeping closer and closer to P3, the Mercedes of Kimi Antonelli, bringing it within a second to keep within that DRS zone to try to stave off the attacking Lando Norris. Lando Norris diving into the hairpin and overtaking Piastri for net P4 within this pursuit, then battling down the back straight, creeping up to the final chicane, side by side, Piastri taking the position back, and then on the main straight, Lando Norris thinking that he was going to have a little more room on the left side, Piastri keeping that door closed, and Norris just, I think he overestimated just how solid, stone cold Oscar Piastri, his teammate, really was. Did not move an inch. Oscar basically allowing or watching Lando Norris collide with his back rear left tire. Lando Norris DNFing from the race in the waning moments. Piastri heading into turn one, just that collision, clipping Piastri's back tire. Front wing comes flying. Norris sent directly into the wall. Very reminiscent of the incident between the McLaren drivers of Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button back in the day. The race ending under safety car. George Russell converting that to a race win. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But this moment from McLaren could very well be one of the biggest moments of the season. It's going to be championship-defining stuff. Lando Norris absolutely needing every single point that he can, trailing in P2, to not finish this race in an incident with his teammate, but to give him some credit, taking full accountability for the wrongdoing there, overestimating the space, making a poor decision, something that has kind of plagued Lando Norris throughout this season and has cost him the opportunity from being the favorite for this championship to now being in, if I'm not mistaken, P3, or still in P2, but a distant P2, at least behind his teammate. Man, this is a moment that can very well characterize this duo. The way that we talk about Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton's moment in Spain, the anniversary of which was just, a couple weeks ago. This moment could very well define the relationship they have within the McLaren paddock. Not to say that Lando Norris felt like he was besmirched and that he had been wronged and that it was his space and it was his moment, but just the morale within the paddock, the morale within the Papaya garage, the morale within the team being so cutthroat, so back and forth. They've been playing nice so far. I'll give them some credit. They've been playing nice, but there are moments like this that we were waiting for. For 10 Grand Prix weekends, we've waited for this kind of a moment between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, and it all culminating here with valuable championship points on the line. So we had to highlight that first. I'm curious to see where this goes, how the relationship alters and changes. If this changes anything at McLaren, I can't imagine that it doesn't, but the rules of engagement. Last year we heard about it. The Papaya rules in Monza, where Oscar Piastri diving down the outside of Lando Norris to take a position there and kind of asserting himself as somebody not to be trifled with, even within his own team. The rules of engagement very well are going to be revised at McLaren. Things are going to be changing a little bit. Not to say that neither of these guys are going to be winning races, but I can't imagine that McLaren want to see either of their drivers DNFing. They've got a very strong hold on this Constructors' Championship, but watching somebody else, the first time this season, if I'm not mistaken, that you have not taken the top step of the podium, or not even just the top step, just taking a step on the podium if you're McLaren. We saw this last year. Red Bull with a really, really, really strong lead early, and it falling away from them, they fell into P3. Now, I'm not saying that McLaren are going to fall all the way down to P3. It's not a one, hand behind, tied behind your back situation like Max Verstappen had last year. But being overtaken in the Constructors, we have plenty of races to go. We're not even at the halfway point. Rules of engagement are going to be changing at McLaren. Rules are going to absolutely be changing. But as for who was on the top step, George Russell, like I mentioned towards the top of the video, converting qualifying pole by a 10th into a race win, but not in a way that was so decisive and dominant that we had seen from previous race winners. George Russell, Mercedes bringing some technical upgrades, finishing up their upgrade package, new suspension outlooks on the rear end, floor edges highlighted as well during the race, and perhaps that could have very well been the silver bullet. Only time is going to tell. Asking George Russell post-race, Nico Rosberg, asking if Mercedes were back in this fight. And, there's still some trepidation. Obviously, the temperatures were a little bit cooler in Canada, but even pre-race, they were not nearly as cool as they had been throughout the entire weekend. Things had definitely warmed up when it came to race day. Are the questions about Mercedes' ability to drive in higher temperatures solved? That's something that we'll just have to find out in Austria, at least in the next couple of weeks. Just how consistently can Mercedes be fighting at the front? We talked about it all season. The margins are so close. Setup windows not being correct could have very well plagued McLaren this weekend. Having the correct setup is so important. Getting clean air, so important that we saw in this race, something that I speculated on coming out of qualifying yesterday. Having that clean air, getting a great jump, which George Russell did to start the race. An amazing jump off the line to cover off Max Verstappen going into turn one. An amazing jump off the line by his teammate, Kimi Antonelli, that netted him the actual final podium spot, P3, in the long run. But getting that clean air has been so important this season. Max Verstappen charging early in this race to try to take that from George Russell. George Russell doing his utmost to keep that position and driving smartly, driving effectively. Mercedes were dominating the corners this weekend, where Red Bull had a lot of straight line speed. But again, cornering for Mercedes was just the dominant factor there. But all in all, George Russell completing an insanely efficient drive. Looked very comfortable, was not phased. The Mercedes pit wall were excellent this weekend. Sub 3 second pit stops pretty much across the board. I think the longest they had was a 3.3 when a little bit of a wheel jam got caught up, I think in the last 20 laps, if I'm not mistaken. But the margins were so close in the top five. Any moment the race lead could have gone a different direction. Had Russell snapped and caught some lockings. Had Russell, made some form of mistake and gone wide on a chicane. Had any of these moments happened, but he was cool, calm, collected, and held in the clutch. And it was just a dominant performance by Mercedes, something that they have been looking for since the beginning of this season, showing some promise. Mercedes reasserting themselves as a factor. As far as his teammate, Kimi Antonelli, setting a historic mark as one of the youngest podium sitters in F1 history at the Canadian Grand Prix. Just 10 races into this 18-year-old's Formula One career, taking one of the top 3 steps on a Formula One podium is nothing short of impressive. Mercedes duo between Kimi, between George, they look like they're going to be locked in for quite a long time. I know the contract talks have been kind of rumoring and sitting in the background a little bit from the Mercedes pit wall. They have been there. There have been conversations about when exactly are these extensions going to get done. Mercedes have some options as far as Kimi Antonelli, George Russell being the big topic of conversation from the pit wall. I can't imagine that Mercedes aren't going to try to expedite that process pretty quickly. Now that George has taken this win, I can't imagine that he's not going to be signing some very, very nice, very lucrative contract in the coming weeks. They got a couple weeks between Canada and Austria to get things sorted. Not going to be surprised if they get the deal done even before Silverstone. Would be a really good time to announce something like that. But all in all, Mercedes, a super dominant weekend for them. They looked really good in practice sessions. They looked really strong in qualifying. Kimi Antonelli, one more time, I want to give him some more kudos. That jump off the line to overtake the World Drivers' Championship leader was massive, resulted in the final podium. Driver of the day, if I'm not mistaken, for Kimi Antonelli as well. Well earned, well deserved, especially after keeping the Papayas in his rearview mirrors. Piastri had a moment where he could have overtaken him in the final laps of this race. Piastri crept into the DRS zone with, I think, about 10 laps to go into Kimi Antonelli. Took a little bit of a dive on the inside, but Kimi Antonelli drove very strong, very defensively against Oscar Piastri, and then held off both of them, both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, in the waning moments of this Grand Prix. As they were dueling it out behind them, Kimi Antonelli driving on his mirrors, trying to figure out exactly which direction he needed to go to give them the least amount of slipstream going down the middle on that back straight. But keeping his composure at just 18 years old. The things that he has done so far in F1 has been nothing short of remarkable. This podium, hopefully and likely, the first of many. So you know me, Tristan was going to hop on here and wax poetic about Mercedes, the resident Mercedes fan, the resident Kimi Antonelli fan, the resident George Russell fan on this podcast between me and Kevin. And we haven't heard much from Kevin recently. I know he's having a little bit of a rough day, seeing exactly what happened today on track, because he's a big fan of Lando Norris, McLaren fan of this podcast as well. So we'll give him we're praying for Kevin. I'm sure he'll be just fine though. But nonetheless, super mega day for Mercedes, and they get a couple more weeks to figure out any more fine tweaks before Austria. But looking around the rest of the grid, we got to talk about Alexander Albon, who in qualifying was still able to net a P8, even though his entire engine cover flew off during Q3 or Q1, if I'm not mistaken, able to survive that to land a P8, but forced to retire during this race. I want to say, I kept some notes here. Forced to retire at a certain point during this race. Really frustrated when it came to the strategy calls between himself and the Williams pit wall. Not a fan of their tire strategy when it came to the mediums, which were degrading very, very, very quickly today. And then at the end of it all, flipping over to the hards at a bad time, was not able to get out of the DRS train during the waning middle section of this race. And at the end of it all, if I'm not mistaken, just suffering some kind of engine failure. Through sector 1 to sector 2, you can just hear the car start to die off, and just kind of putting a cherry on top of an absolutely terrible Sunday for the Thai driver. Alex Albon, we've heard a lot of very colorful radio commentary coming from him at certain points of this season, but I don't think that we're definitely going to have to talk about this on another on a segment with Kevin. I know he wants to go over radio calls. We're definitely going to be talking about the Alex Albon stuff. He just sounds so. It sounds like there's not an effective line of communication between him and his engineers, having some levels of disconnect, and the frustration has boiled over a number of times this season. But as far as Alex Albon's concerned, just a really rough day. I think Williams and Alex Albon are going to be very, very, very hungry to put this one in the rearview mirror. But to their credit, they still did net points, with Carlos Sainz finishing in a square P10 to grab one more Constructors' Championship points. So you take the good with the bad. Really strong drive from Carlos Sainz, who ended Saturday eliminated in Q1. I think he started P18, P17 on the grid on race day, but able to recover that amid all the craziness of this Grand Prix Sunday to net at least 1 point for Williams, which goes a long way when you're in the midfields, when you're fighting off, back markers at certain points. Williams have looked really strong this year, but obviously there's still some things that need to be kind of ironed out. As far as ironing out as well, Ferrari and Charles Leclerc were just not on the same page. Ferrari have been in the media a little bit lately. Italian media sort of drumming things up about questions about whether Fred Vasseur was going to be there long term, whether or not Lewis Hamilton was the correct investment, whether or not Charles Leclerc was a World Drivers' Championship level material driver. And yes, he is. I think that with the right car, I think Charles could very well find himself at the top step at the end of the season, so to speak. Lewis Hamilton has struggled so far to get a hold of this car. Outside of that Chinese sprint weekend win, he's had a lot of notable struggles. I think he had some kind of anecdote over the weekend talking about how this car is like trying to get somebody who has no rhythm to dance. So you're trying to get this thing to be smooth and suave and working well and in motions. And I'm not a very smooth and suave dancer myself. I'm not much of a dancer at all. But he's just not very comfortable. He's not hooked up with this car. I imagine that a lot of the infrastructure still, and I mentioned this a lot on other episodes of the podcast, but I think that Lewis, in a nutshell, is just struggling. He's just looking forward to 2026. I think Fred Vasseur is still the correct leader for this team. I think the infrastructure is still very, very, very strong under Fred Vasseur. There have been rumors about Christian Horner coming into the fold at Ferrari. Rumors are rumors in F1. A lot of times it's really last minute you find out if these things are true. I don't know that I believe that would actually happen. Red Bull have been really strong in their support of Christian Horner anyway. But Ferrari ignoring Leclerc when it came to strategy. They were insisting on a plan B strategy that I imagined was going to pit him a lot earlier. He insisting on a plan C, wanted to go longer on the medium tires, was a big fan of the medium tires. Ferrari kind of overruling that, switching over to the hards. Got some real disdain on the radio call there early in the race. Excuse me. And then late in the race, just again, another moment when it came to discrepancies over strategy calls, over tire decisions. Both the Ferrari drivers, if I'm not mistaken, finishing P5, P6. So it was a good points tally weekend for Ferrari that walked into the weekend in P2. I don't know that that's necessarily the case anymore. Mercedes with their win and P3 probably would have taken that constructor's spot back. But an overall wishy-washy weekend. They were in the realm of possibility when it came to a possible pole position on Saturday, but things just aren't quite clicking at Ferrari right now. They're still ebbing through highs and lows. I think Lewis Hamilton understands that, but for Charles Leclerc walking into the season, the expectation's so high. Heck, even both Kevin and I both picking Ferrari drivers to be at least competitive within this World Drivers' Championship in our preseason. Me being very ambitious, thinking Lewis Hamilton is going to, shock the world, but not misguided at all. Kevin picking Charles Leclerc at the time to win the World Drivers' Championship. And so far this season, Ferrari fans and Ferrari speculators and Ferrari analysts and F1 fans have been very perplexed at the wishy-washy performance of Ferrari. But man, hopefully they'll get it together. I mean, we still got a lot of racing left to go. I can't imagine they're going to be dysfunctional for at least their expectation standard throughout the entire season. But now that this race is in the rear view mirror, I know we just wrapped things up, and I mean like within the last couple of hours of whenever this video was actually going to hit the interwebs. But man, what an exciting race. My overall takeaways for this race, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Close fighting at the front between George Russell and Max Verstappen. George Russell earning his first win of this season in a year that's been dominated by Papaya supremacy. Max P2 keeping him under pressure effectively the entire way, keeping Mercedes on their toes the entire way. Kimi Antonelli fending off Piastri and both of the McLarens really to keep P3, to keep them out of the podium places, staying in the top 5, possibly a season-defining crash, a huge moment that's going to go down on the recaps of the 2025 season between the two McLaren drivers as it pertains to the World Drivers' Championship. Definitely some shakeups there. The Constructors' Championship, definitely a little bit of shakeup beneath P1 in the Constructors' fight. Historic podium for Kimi Antonelli once again. He can, in fact, drink the champagne in Montreal, by the way. A quick Google search revealed that anyway. So for me, all in all, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. You guys, if you stuck around and watched the whole video, please let me know what you think in the comments below. What did you think of this race overall? Were you impressed by George Russell? What were your thoughts on Kimi Antonelli's drive? What do you think of the collision between the two McLaren drivers? Can Ferrari pull themselves out of this funk? Are Williams going to continue to lead the midfield? We're going to be talking about all that and more on this upcoming episode of the Lap Podcast. So if you drop your comments in right now, we're going to be talking about the stuff that you guys bring to the conversation. So please do not be shy. Let us know what you're thinking. I cannot wait to get to the podcast on Wednesday. Hopefully I'm going to be in studio with Kevin Walker as we go through and sort out all the craziness, all the madness of this Canadian Grand Prix. And then the week afterwards, we get to talk about the upcoming Austria Grand Prix. So a lot of exciting content coming your way, TLPs. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Give us a follow on all the social medias. We've got these guys scrolling down on the bottom of the screen this entire time. Feel free to follow us, me and Kevin Walker, on our personal social medias. Feel free to interact with us. Come say hi. You know, we love to hear from you guys. So make sure to do that as well. Costs you absolutely nothing to support this channel. $0.00. Anyway, with that all being said, we appreciate you guys watching, and I'm going to catch you guys in the next one. Be safe, be well, and let's go racing.